So as the staffer, what value do they offer to you?
Uh, they provide information. I mean, it's in this space in particular, there tend not to be people in the government who do it for a very long time. I probably had one of the longer tenures operating in this space in one way or another, about 10 years. But my successor with the leader, she hasn't worked in this space since like 2018. My successor on committee really had only worked in the space for a few years. And so it's an area where there's a lot of turnaround. And so having people on the outside who have this knowledge can be very, very helpful. Um, and there's a bit of a difference too between how Republicans and Democrats operate in this space. What I've found is that Republican staff tend to do a lot of their own work. Um, our guys really dig through these people's records. They find like it's the professional official staff who find the real hits, either when we're going after Democrat nominees or the weaknesses for our guys that we have to defend against. And so with Democrats, it didn't always seem to be that way. I think they tend to rely more, especially when they're on offense, on their outside groups to give them the information. It probably goes back to, when PFAL was going after Robert Bork. But like when I was at the Office of Legal Policy, we literally wait for the Alliance for Justice to publish its reports on our nominees during the weeks of the hearings. And we'd print them off, hot off the presses, and give them to the mooters in real time to hit the nominees with what AFJ was saying about them. Because we had figured out pretty quickly that a lot of the less senior Democrats just pulled their questions straight from the AFJ reports. So that's not something that we really do on our side, but it so far has been something that they do on their side. And so there's how the groups play with relation to the official side. It really does vary from party to party.
Hmm. And why is that? Is that a function of the resources that are available to the one side or the other, or what?
Could be function of the resources available, could just be the tradition of it. Again, they've been doing that for a long time. The other sort of difference is, as a general matter, their base and their organizations are a lot more animated in trying to take out Republican nominees. And ours are a lot more animated in trying to get Republican nominees over the finish line. So I think you see a lot of the work from our nonprofits really going towards pushing the ball forward when we're in charge. And then when Democrats are in charge, it really does kind of fall to the official side, and that might be why they do more of it. Whereas, yeah, on the left, they've always, again, going back to the 1980s, been interested in taking out our people, and so they have the infrastructure for it.
You use the word mooter. I just want to allow you to define that. That's I assume a practice round of questions.
Yeah, the lawyers in the department who are doing a dry run of the hearing with the nominees.
Mhm. To the degree you're willing to name names of groups, not people, I suppose, or maybe people. Who's good at doing the appropriate stuff? Are there better ones than others? There have to be, right? But who would be an example of a good one, I guess, without throwing elbows at bad
I mean,
ones?
I think most all the guys on the right are good at doing it the right way. JCN's very good at providing good information and then also putting up pretty hard hitting ads. EPPC's got good historical information. Article 3 projects very good at energizing a particular segment of the base that maybe our legacy groups are less good at. When Mike Davis goes on Steve Bannon, he gets a lot of eyeballs. Um, you
Yeah.
have more specialized groups like First Liberty really does kind of focus on religious liberty. ADF does really focus on social issues, and they're good at both identifying pros and cons for nominees and then also motivating their bases, which are in their membership, which is pretty considerable. Um, yeah, so I think it's on the appropriate side. I think our guys are all quite good.
If even only hypothetically, what would be inappropriate for these groups to do as a legal or practical matter?
I mean, for that, I look at what the left does. If you look at demand justice, I think they're still around. I don't know who their current leadership is because I know they're longtime sort of honcho left to go work for Harris, and I don't know if he's back or not. And you don't see as much from them these days. But at their peak, they were kind of like Biff Tannen from Back to the Future in terms of bullying Chuck Schumer and Democrat leadership. And they do it on tactics. They spent a lot of time and money just hammering Democrats from the top to make specific tactical decisions. So voting in lockstep against Trump nominations, universal filibuster against Trump nominations. These are the sorts of things that sort of your average Democrat probably was uncomfortable doing, but they were under tremendous pressure on the tactical side from the left to do that. So that I think had all sorts of negative effects, even from their own perspective. Like they got to show that they're fighting more, and that probably felt good. But insofar as they put pressure on Schumer to filibuster Neil Gorsuch, that's how we got Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Barrett, is them filibustering the obviously well-qualified, relatively inoffensive Neil Gorsuch, let McConnell kill the filibuster, which then put Kavanaugh at 50 votes and Barrett at 50 votes. If Kavanaugh had been at 60 votes, I don't think he gets through. If Barrett had been at 60 votes, absolutely no way she gets through. So focusing not on sort of the merits of the process, the merits of nominees, the role of the courts, but then focusing specifically on like tactical stuff that's properly in the province of members and leadership, I think it tends to backfire.
Mm-hmm. Somebody might say or want to ask, what, you don't do, Republicans, conservatives don't do the same thing?
They do in most places other than judges.
Mm-hmm.
I won't name names, but plenty of places in DC that are very active in terms of what procedural stuff and tactical stuff should be going on in Congress. Very rarely do they get involved in judges. I can think of really only one instance, and that was some think tankers tried to prevent McConnell from nuking the judicial filibuster on the Supreme Court, arguing instead that they should use the two-speech rule to draw them out. And first of all, it probably wouldn't have worked tactically. Secondarily, like there was good reason from a Senate norms perspective to get rid of that filibuster. And so it just caused problems for the optimal outcome. I guess there was also, for my time, but when Republicans took over the Senate in 2015, there was a lot of noise that they should bring back the 60 vote threshold, so reverse the Harry Reid nuclear option. And I think that probably came mostly from think tank world. But the response to it also largely came from think tank world and guys like Leonard and Ed. And luckily they won out, and McConnell wasn't about to be bullied on it because he was right. Like it was ridiculous for the Democrats to do that when they did it because they'd wind up reaping what they sowed. But in the end, it wasn't a bad thing that they reaped what they sowed because we got to put some really great people on the bench.
To the degree that the groups, the nonprofits, are recommending pushing what might be considered harsh tactics, do you think that might be for purposes of pleasing their donors? Is that a donor-driven problem, or what?
It could be. I think on the left, it was definitely a donor-driven problem, and then also, a base-driven problem. It probably depends on how they're funded, right? Traditionally, the way I think it worked is you push leadership on tactics to do your direct mail blast about how you're the real conservatives or the real progressives and animate your base to give you money. I don't think that's what's been happening here. And so I think it's probably, at least on the left side, prominent donors pushing it.
Yeah. Uh, Thinking now just of C3s and the law regarding C3s. Is this charitable, all this stuff? Is this charity?
Probably depends on the activity. Um, Educating the public seems pretty charitable, for example. Beyond that, I mean, I'm not sure by dictionary definition, but
Yeah.
given what the IRS considers charitable, like it seems better than donating to Harvard. So
Okay. Yes. And then another to the degree question, to the degree the process or processes, thinking of nomination and confirmation almost as two different things uh, there, to the degree though they have been negatively affected by nonprofits, what can be done about it, if anything, including, regulatorily or whatever?
and I don't know, probably not that much. You know, having worked for Mitch McConnell, if I suggested any regulation of this, I'd probably have a bomb go off in my car.
Yeah.
So I'm not especially interested in advocating for any sort of regulation of this space because at the end of the day, it is a question of speech. And um, sort of to your earlier question, is it charitable? Maybe not, but I think it all goes to um, broader, longer standing issues of political speech that we have in the country, where um, for 30 or 40 years, the government has been trying to encroach on what kind of political speech is available through the spending of money. And others, like McConnell in particular, have been pushing back on that. And so you wind up with these various legal formalities that money has to sort of go into in order to advance speech. But in this space in particular, like, yes, some of it is educational, but a lot of it is political speech, but sort of under a different guise. And maybe that's maybe that's the solution. Just get rid of any uh, caps on political spending, and then you won't necessarily have to deal with these kinds of regulatory fictions to
Yeah.
get messages across.
In general, you made the comparison to Harvard, right? Also, you'd get a deduction for donating to Harvard. Uh, on either side, are these good philanthropic investments to support these groups, or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what they're doing. In the big picture, I think it is because I think there's probably few things more important in the long term than the composition of the courts, either for the right or for the left. Um, and I think there's really the capacity to do a lot of good in this space if you're a philanthropist. Um, Sort of as I said earlier, it's not an area where people in government do it for a long time. And a big part of that is that it's a very important area of public policy that has no obvious way to monetize it. So if you're a lawyer in government and you're a prosecutor, you can then go be a criminal defense lawyer or do white collar investigations or something. If you're an expert in judges, like you have connections with judges who then can't do anything for you because it'll be unethical, right? So there's just not there's not an obvious way to turn that into a career in policy or the law. And so that's, I think, part of why people, they'll, on the right in particular, they'll do it for a spell because they believe in it and it's interesting, but then they'll go do something else. And so with that dynamic, it's, I think, really the nonprofit unofficial side that maintains the institutional knowledge that allows the official side to operate effectively. And so, again, it depends on what the grant is towards, but insofar as it is funding the capabilities to maintain institutional knowledge, that actually is potentially very helpful in what's otherwise, I think, a very important public policy question.
Well, unless there's something I did not ask or something you want to add, I think we can wrap it up there. after thanking you, Michael Fragoso, for doing this with us today. Thanks so much.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.